Good morning and welcome to the Pastor's Chat from Fletcher United Methodist Church today. I'm Randy Sherrill, the teaching pastor. And today's Pastor's Chat is going to be somewhat of a different nature because I've been spending a lot of time recently reminiscing since I've had the time with Kathy still in rehab, and she is doing much better. Still have issues, but she is progressing. Had a lot of time to be at the house by myself and work on things and think, and especially some of the recent sermons and memories that have come back to me. But I was especially sparked in the last week or so as I have passed at least twice, if not 4 times a day, a house on Howard Gap Road that had fallen into disrepair, and part of the old house had collapsed, and the family has started to demolish it and get ready, I think, for another house, maybe their structure. And they've been working for several weeks. And especially I noticed a young boy, probably 10 to 12 years of age, who has been working with his father or grandfather, or maybe both. And he's been doing a fabulous job on some fairly heavy equipment. And for being a small fellow, to be running a tractor with a front-end loader and helping to demolish the house. And then also I saw him yesterday operating a fairly good-sized track hoe. And those of you who know what that is that's a pretty major piece of equipment, and he was operating it just like a veteran. And it brought back to me the memory that by the time I took driver's education in the country, I'd been driving for years, not in vehicles on the road, but Dad put me on the tractor when I was like 10 years old to plow and to cultivate and to turn the soil on our little 3 to 4 acre garden. And so I was used to driving, and so driver's training was easy. Reflecting on simpler times and what was so important that I really didn't appreciate it as much as I wish I had. I remember fresh vegetables. Remember that 3 to 4 acre garden? We had lots of fresh vegetables. And at times I even complained at the meals to say, it's just vegetables. And I would love to have farm-to-table vegetables just coming out of the garden. And my mom would make biscuits, a big tray of biscuits, 3 meals a day out of that green bowl where she didn't measure a thing. And they were so wonderful to be hot out of the oven, and butter. And at that time, when I was not allergic to them, slices of tomatoes on that. And Mom always winked at us and said, whoever gets the last biscuit has to kiss the cook. And so I always loved to get the last biscuit. And then we would work together, usually Mom and I, of doing the dishes together. And that's one of the places that she and I got to talk. And we sang hymns together as we worked on the dishes. Our family was a full opportunity family. We worked together inside, and we especially worked together outside. Mom and Dad and the boys all together working and helping one another in that endeavor. And one of the favorite things, especially during the middle of the summer when we'd been working, when Dad was not working at the mill, sometimes late in the afternoon, Dad would look at me and say, you want to go fishing tonight? And we would go get some worms or minnows or other bait and go down to Lake Norman and sit on our property, a little lot at the lake, and fish, catfish into the deep of the night, and listening to all the animals and insects and frogs, and just being able to talk with my dad. And just being able to sit there quietly together and just enjoy that time. I remember one of the differences of my mom and dad was their take on thunderstorms. My mother was not happy with thunderstorms, and I really don't know where that came from. But her policy for especially a strong thunderstorm is that everyone had to get inside the house, go and sit on the living room furniture, and usually you didn't spend much time in the living room, but our family did not have plastic coverings over the living room furniture. but to sit there quietly with the lights off. My dad, who I agreed with on this one, was very much differently. Dad and I both loved Thunderstorms. And with Mom shaking her head, we would go out on the side porch and sit as the thunderstorm came through on the metal porch furniture, and just love to take in the aroma of that nitrogen, that smell of the rain, and Mom standing at the door shaking her head. You're going to get hit. You're going to die. And Dad just smiling at her. I also remember that Dad planted by the Farmer's Almanac and other signs, and some of those he would never plant corn before we heard the first whippoorwill. Because usually as it started to cool off in the evenings, after we'd finished taking care of the dishes, we'd go sit on that side porch and just listen. Talk a little bit, but mostly listen. And I can remember the sound of the whippoorwills and the quail and the woodpeckers. And it has been so long, decades, since I've heard a whippoorwill or even the quail calling to one another. When it came to be canning time, especially for green beans, Dad and Mom would get out and usually very early in the morning pick 3 or 4 or 5 bushels of green beans and then wake me up. I was the official stringer, and I could knock off a bushel of green beans, stringing them in well under an hour. I was a champion. And then my next job, when the canning was ready to be done and putting them in the pressure cooker, my job was to watch the gauge on that pressure cooker and never let that gauge get outside of that 2 or 3 point differential. And so I was constantly adjusting the gas flame. And so I miss those times. Not only miss those times, but those people that I shared those with, because most of them are no longer on this earth, but are in the great cloud of witnesses. So I encourage you, the simpler things while we're still stuck apart, to treasure them, listening to one another, telling stories, laughing together, and working together. So I hope that you can find some of those times and places this week. And when we get back together again, I would love to hear some of your stories. Have a blessed week.